Hello and welcome back everyone to yet another episode of A to Z Chess Opening Series. In today's episode, we are going to learn from the alphabet J. And from J, we have the Jaenisch gambit. Jaenisch gambit is a powerful and aggressive reply to the Ruy-lopez, or we also call it as the Spanish opening. It starts with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, attacking, defending. Now when the opponent plays their bishop to b5, we play our pawn to f5. Now, this is an aggressive line from black, trying to control the center, attack in the center, and going from the flank. Right. If you might have seen the video before that I've posted on the Russo Gambit, the only slight difference there in the Russo Gambit is the bishop is on c4, and then we play our pawn to f5. Here also, you can do the same thing in Spanish. After the bishop comes to b5 square, you play your pawn to f5. Now, there are 3-4 ways how white can respond. Most common at the beginner level, which is done, is they capture on the f5 square, they accepted the gambit, and then you start by pushing your pawn up to e4, attacking the knight. Now, the knight has no good squares to go to because these two squares are taken care by this knight, and these two squares are taken care by the queen. So, the only option for him is to go back. But if your opponent tries to act smart here by eliminating the knight first, if he captures the knight, you capture it back and then jump in with the knight on the d4 square. At that time, you are afraid of his queen h5, right? You're thinking that his queen might come to h5, give you a check. Since there's no pawn on the f7 square, it will be very tricky and dangerous. For this, some player might want to go queen g5, attacking this pawn, attacking this pawn over here, and protecting the h5 square with the queen itself. But what I suggest here is to play the queen to f6. When you play your queen on the f6 square, when you play your queen on the f6 square, you are attacking the pawn, you're attacking the knight, and you're also protecting the h5. Even if here your opponent tries to go queen h5, trying to act smart, then you can push your pawn up to g6. If he capture, now you capture it back with the pawn. Sadly, he cannot capture the rook on the h8 square. But if he falls for the trap, if he captures the rook, then you capture it back with the queen. But if he is not capturing it, instead he's just moving his queen back on the g4 square. At this point, you can first capture the knight. You are winning a free knight. The knight was hanging there. If he captures on the g6 square, thinking that he's giving you a check, then the king is safe on d8. There's nothing that can be done to the king on the d8 square. Now, I'm just showing you a few more moves, the continuation of the game, just to have an idea on how you can continue with the black. If your opponent tries to castle, the normal developing move, then you play a bishop to d6. Now, idea is very clear, very simple and clear behind bishop d6 is attack on the h2 square. If he defends it by playing his pawn to g3, then you play a knight to e7, attack the queen. Will have to go back, and then you play a bishop to a6, bringing the bishop from the other side. So you are now developing all your pieces. You're doing great, and the king cannot be attacked. When the rook goes to e1 square, now this comes with a deadly sacrifice. You play a rook to h2. If the king captures it, then queen f2 check, and you win in style. Giving a check, the king has to go back. You capture the rook, you capture it back, and finally it will be a clear win for black, right? So this was all when he plays his queen to h5. Now here there's an option. Instead of him playing the queen to h5, what if he defends the knight? What if he plays his pawn to c3, protecting the knight? At that point, you can first play your bishop to a6. The idea behind bishop a6 is simple. You are cutting the king from castling. Also, look at this juicy d3 square supported by the pawn. So you are not allowing his pawn to come up, and hence the development of the other pieces will be hampered. The bishop and the knight won't be able to go out. So if he plays his pawn to c3, you have bishop to a6 move. Then coming back to this position where if he doesn't capture your pawn, what if he's not capturing on e5, instead he's capturing your knight first with the bishop. When you recapture it, he can capture the pawn on e5 with the knight, thinking he's a pawn up. But you go with the normal classic Ruy-lopez style. Whenever this comes in, you play your queen to d4. The idea behind queen d4 is to attack the pawn as well as the knight. Now again, if your opponent tries to act smart with a check, if he plays his queen to h5, then also we are not worried about anything because pawn g6, the knight captures it, you capture it back with the pawn again. Remember, your queen is on the same diagonal, so he won't be able to capture the rook. This tactic works a lot of time. This is the usual tactic that works a lot of time only when the queen is on d8. This time the queen is on d4. D4 means in the same diagonal as that of the rook, and he won't be able to capture your rook there. So he'll just lose the knight there. Even if he tries to continue by playing queen g6, then you go king d8. Now if he captures the pawn on the f5 square, then we start with an attack. We play a knight to e7, attack the queen as well as the f5 pawn. If he wants to defend it, the pawn, he goes on g5. Now you capture with the bishop. You're attacking on this side of the board. Also, if he castles over here, then you play a bishop to h6, attack the queen. The queen will have to go back to g3, and then boom, bishop to f4. Game is all. So the game is all for black now. On attacking the queen moves, the h2 pawn will be fallen, and you will win the game eventually, right? So this was when he captures your knight with the bishop on the c6 square. Now there's one more option that he could do is just decline the gambit and play simple pawn to d3, protecting the pawn on e4. In this case, you will be capturing on e4 square. Once he captures it back, now you play on knight to f6, the normal developing move. Now if the knight moves, then the pawn on e5 will be lost, right? So he's going for the development. You pin his knight. Now your idea behind pinning this is to win the pawn, right? What if he gets out of the pin? What if he simply castles? If he castles there, then you capture the knight. Capturing back. Now these all pawns are weak and you want to slowly and steadily take the advantage of these weak pawns. How are we going to do that? First by playing our pawn to d6, protecting our e5 pawn. The time we go to capture over here, he might come with the rook to e1 and our e5 pawn will be lost. So we are protecting it, and then next we are aiming to capture his free pawn. If he pins our knight over here, then we simply castle. Why? Because we are protecting our knight now with the rook, and it is good to have your rook on the semi-open file. It would be great for the attack. If he places pawn to h3 in this position, then you do a very, very, very beautiful manner. You play your queen to e8. The idea behind queen e8 is simple. You want to go with the queen to g6, attack this bishop. Once the bishop moves, bishop h3 is on the line. So he moved his rook to e1, queen g6. Now, if he goes back with the bishop, then obviously bishop h3 wins the game for you. But what if he captures the knight on the f6 square with his bishop? At that time, you capture it back with the rook. Again, you are giving an attack to the knight on f3, you are attacking the pawn on h3 with the bishop, and the g2 pawn is pinned. If he wants to get out of this pin, he might go king h2. At this point, you play bishop e6, bringing more pieces in the attack. Bishop e6, the idea is to play the rook from a8 to f8, double the rooks over there. And I personally feel this position is very good to continue as black. You have developed your pieces so well. There's no weakness in the position. Also, look at these two pawns will be falling. Look at the king and your tremendous attack on the side of the board. So eventually, Black will go on to win this game. This was all about the Jaenisch Gambit. If you liked this gambit, do try against your friends and your opponents in the next tournament that you play. If you like the video, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share with your chess friends. Thank you.